Hello and welcome to Ashling's Answers, the channel where I answer questions to do with geography, politics and science, because my parents got sick of me talking about it at the dinner table. Okay, so we throw the word objective around all the time. My personal favourite use of it is right before I say something incredibly subjective and opinionated. For example, that t-shirt is objectively hideous. But for clarity, being objective, or if something is objective, it means that it's not influenced by personal beliefs or feelings. So the exact opposite of how I use it in my day-to-day life. And being subjective is the opposite of that. And so it means that you are influenced by your beliefs and feelings. So an opinion, for example. So the problem here is the idea that objectivity is even possible, because we can't think outside our brains or take a vacation from them, unfortunately. Everyone is influenced by their life experiences, their history, the information they've consumed, and being objective assumes that you can put all of that to one side and think outside of your own brain. It's this kind of active process where you try and think like a generic human being, which doesn't exist, but whatever, and act as they would, or write as they would, and think as they would. A sort of disembodied view from nowhere, some might say. Donna Haraway warns that so often this generic human being is actually just code for a straight, cis, white man, and this idea of objective neutrality is this god trick, where you feel like you can see the world as it is, for everything that it is, unaffected by your worldview, when you can't, it's just a trick. She argues that the only way to be objective is to appreciate that knowledge is partial and embodied. So this recognises that you as an individual affect the kind of knowledge that you produce and the way you report on things. This is also known as a view from somewhere, or situated knowledges, which is that knowledge is influenced by the environment it's created in, and also by the environment that the creator of that knowledge is in. But stuff like science is objective, I hear you thinking super loudly on the other side of the screen, and kind of, but not really, so let's interrogate that. According to Sarah Harding, science being value neutral is more a statement of intent rather than reality. But scientists actively try to be objective and minimise their influence on what they produce. So you do that through quite a few checks and balances, which I'm sure everyone does at school even, but repeating your experiment multiple times, testing hypotheses, peer reviewing articles, and being aware of your own biases. All of this to try and counteract human subjectivity from influencing the knowledge and the experiment that they're doing. The thing is that the impact of the individual seeps into the process even before you reach any of these checks and balances. It's all tied up in what people decide to study in the first place. People are more likely to study and research what feels interesting and important to them, or if you're feeling cynical, what is important and interesting to people with the money to fund the research. And it's in that moment of choosing what to study that people are most themselves. Let's take gender, for example. The gender of the researcher or the funder often influences what they believe to be interesting and important and worth the time and resources to study. As Harding puts it, science has been skewed to study men's perception of what they find puzzling. So a quick example I read in The Independent is that researchers conducted 5 times as many studies on erectile dysfunction compared to premenstrual syndrome, or PMS as most people call it, even though only 19% of men suffer from erectile dysfunction compared to 90% of women. Or moving away from gender and towards economic disparity and people just researching things closer to home. In 2013, Bill Gates spoke to the press about his shock that more money was spent on research about reversing hair loss than on malaria. Assuming that people are behaving objectively means that we don't interrogate their motivations, and so it's important to strive to have as little personal impact on the research and the knowledge that you create and the way that you communicate that. But appreciate that it's nearly impossible to remove it completely, and so to be very open about what could possibly be motivating you. As Harding says, even scientists are social artifacts, or in other words, people. And we have to keep that in mind. The same can be said for journalists, although I don't think they're held on such a pedestal of objectivity compared to scientists, because them and the work that they do is so much more visible. There's not this, oh, behind closed doors vibe or mystique. You see them working, and so there isn't such a holding them up on a pedestal. What people choose to write about is what they think is important and interesting, or what they think other people think is important and interesting and would read and consume. But actually what you think other people are interested in is as much about your upbringing and your worldview as it is about what they actually want to read about. So in journalism, I also think it's important to recognise the near impossibility of objectivity, but instead strive for this balance and fairness. This means showing both sides of the story and trying to be as fair to both as you possibly can. This is the idea of impartiality, which is so important to UK broadcast journalism that it's actually in the Ofcom guidelines, and you can get in a lot of trouble if you break it. But what about things that you see for yourself that aren't reported back to you, like photos and videos? Well, they're not necessarily objective either. And I'm not talking about like deep fakes or photoshopped or edited videos, although we'll get to those later. Even unphotoshopped and unedited videos and photos aren't necessarily objective. This is because there's a person behind every photo and video, and as we've touched on earlier, they're influenced by the history and the information they've consumed, and that individual has chosen to capture that image or that video, and in that process chosen not to capture something else. And there can be varying levels of intent behind that. You might capture the most beautiful thing, the most interesting thing, or the most distressing or destroyed thing. And because you can't photograph everything, no matter how hard we try, there's always something that gets missed out and you can never see the whole picture. What was going on behind the person taking that photo? That's what you've got to ask, or off to the side or whatever. Why did they choose to capture that one moment? What was their purpose? And just because it's not objective, it's not automatically nefarious. I mean, it'd be ridiculous if we asked everyone to photograph absolutely everything. But it's important to remember that, yeah, if you can see something, it doesn't mean that it's objective and it's 100% this truth. You're always seeing photos and videos through the lens of someone else and through their eyes and worldview. Then obviously editing and Photoshop and deepfakes means that we can't take anything for granted. So anyway, let's wrap things up. Objectivity is a dangerous idea because it can stop us from interrogating the intentions behind other people's actions, the knowledge they produce, and the way they communicate information. True objectivity is mostly a myth, so we shouldn't use it as a safety blanket which allows us to turn off our critical thinking. Instead, the idea of fairness and being aware of our biases is a much more active and useful process because it doesn't try and smooth over the intricacies of individuals, but instead it announces them and doesn't hide behind the veil of objectivity. So basically we need self-reflection and always questioning the intentions behind the knowledge and information produced by other people, even people that we often assume are objective. If you like this video, give it a like and subscribe to see more videos like this. And if you have any questions about geography, politics or science that you'd like me to look into, then comment below and the next video could be about something that you've been interested in for a while now. On that note, I hope you have a great week and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. See you then!